Hi guys, thank you for joining me. Rob here again with another Tuesday video. It's a gorgeous day out there and I hope wherever you are it's nice too weather-wise. Busy weekend for me again, playing and teaching and so on. And on Saturday night I did a wedding gig down in Dorset, and the bass player on the gig, it was a pickup gig, I'd never met the guys before, turned out to be Andy Coughlin, who used to play with Gary Newman back in the day. In 1984 on the Berserker tour, and 85 I think or 86 on the Fury tour. So and he actually played on a charity single that me, Chris Payne, Andy, Robert Dean, put together by Stephen Roper, if you remember, a little while ago. I'll put a link below if you haven't seen the video and heard the track, but it's ex-members of Gary Newman's band all playing together, and we come up with this track. Anyway, so I met Andy, so that was really cool, and it was good playing those tunes with him. You know, we weren't playing Gary Newman stuff. Obviously, it was a wedding, though it could have been a Newman-themed wedding. Who knows? And more kind of 50s, 60s stuff. But yeah, it was brilliant, and what a lovely guy. What a laugh we had. Anyway, today, what are we talking about? So today, I thought I'd talk a little bit about sound on the drum set. Now, whether you're playing, you know, vintage kit, a modern kit, an expensive kit, a cheap kit, parts of a kit, it's really important to think about the sound you want to create. And of course, the sound actually comes from your hands and your feet and your brain and your body. It comes from you and what you do when you hold some sticks. Now, an interesting thing that I show some students that I saw Steve Smith do a little while ago, and hopefully it comes through on the camera and on the microphone, okay? But when you hold a stick and you hit it and you grip it quite hard, it's got a certain sound. Now, if I grip it a bit lighter, it's not quite so dark. So again, if I grip the stick, it's got a darker, lower sound. And if I lighten up a little bit, now I think that's a really good thing to check out. And you can do that with match grip as well. It's not a trad grip thing. But you know, what it's saying is the way you're holding the stick and bring it down on the drum is going to make, or the cymbal, it's going to make a massive impact on the sound that you create. So holding the stick a little lighter in your snare drum hand will produce a slightly different sound on the snare, the toms, the cymbals, everything, you know, right hand, left hand, or your third hand if you've got one. So this is really important. You know, it's almost like thinking about burying the beater into the bass drum and bringing it back. You know, they're all different techniques to create different sounds. So firstly, try this on your drum kit, you know, with the grip. Try it on your cymbals. Jazz players might find if they're really tight when they're playing, gripping the stick, you're probably choking the stick a little bit too much on the right cymbal. So try and relax a little bit more, you know, between your thumb and your, or if you're left-handed, but your thumb and your first finger, maybe move it back to your second finger a little bit, you know, just lighten up the grip a little bit, because the right cymbal might start singing a bit more. As I say, same on the drums, really, really important. So that's something you could try straight off the bat. And also the other thing is, teaching a lot, I see a lot of drummers, you know, wrestling with, do I bury the beater? Do I bring the beater back off of the head? What's the right technique? And for me, it's always to do with the sound. You know, it's what sound you want to create. If you want a really big fat bass drum sound with not a lot of ring after the stroke, then obviously burying the beater is going to work. And again, if we're looking at sound, it depends whether your bass drum head is ported. That means it's got a hole in it. Whether it's got hardly any dampening in there. It might have two felt strips each side of the bass drum, you know, on the batter head and the resonant side. But it might have a massive carpet in there, you know, you might like it really dead, in which case, you know, beater on, beater off is going to make a massive difference. But again, when you've got the time, experiment. If you play a non-ported head, try a ported head, and vice versa. And then you can move about, when it's ported, you can move the towel or pillow or whatever you've got in there, bits of felt or whatever you're using, tea towels, whatever, you can move it around a little bit, put your hand in and just move it around to create different sounds, and you'd be surprised what you can get. So I often find that if you know, you turn up at a gig and they say, oh, it's a house kit, and you think, oh, you know, I try and tune it and get involved in it as soon as I can, even if the heads are a bit funky, which they usually are, aren't they, on house kits, because they're battered to death. But, you know, try and get in there and make it sound sweet by understanding how to do these things, and starting with the bass drum. That's one of the first things I do. look at the tuning, see what the heads are like, what condition they're in. And then it's usually ported because there's going to be a mic in it, it's a house kit. And then sort of fiddle about with that and try and get a nice sound to my ear that if it sounds good to you, it's probably going to sound pretty good through the mics. If it's got a ring or a ding or something weird about it, it's not going to sound good. If it doesn't sound good, acoustic is the rule. It's not going to sound good put through the microphones. That's generally the deal. You know, and then I go around and tune the set. You know, so with the burying the beater, you know, I find it gives me the right kind of impact on like a rock tune. If I was playing with Susie, I bury the beater a lot. It feels good to drive into the drum. Equally, you can play loud strokes when you don't bury the beater as well, which I also do as well if I want the drum to sing a bit more. Again, depending on the bass drum, whether it's ported, non-ported, and so on. Now, often when it's not ported and you bury the beater, depending on the damping within the drum, you tend to get like a little sort of, I call it a farty sound, where literally the beater, so this is our bass drum playing batter head, resonant head, where the beater hits the batter head, and then obviously the air goes through, hits the other head and comes back. So the head within split seconds. So the beater stays on the head and goes, but then again, if it's dampened quite heavily, might not do that. But again, something to try. If it is doing that, maybe, you know, you want to pick the bass drum, move the dampening about a little bit more, because obviously you can't put your hand in because it's ported, non-ported. Yeah, so you might find that it does that. And if it does that and you like burying the beater, maybe just put a bit more dampening in there, you know, just to make it so it doesn't do that kind of farty sound thing. But yeah, laying into the bass drum, bringing the beater off of the bass drum, letting the drum breathe. I've just done some sessions, I talked about it last week at Earthworm Studios with my good friend Andy Maggs. And on that kit, it was the Heyman kit, and it had a massive massive hole in the bass drum, very 70s. There's only about that much of all the way round of the old head on there. The rest of it, he or she had basically got a knife to it, Stanley knife. But that sounded great. But even on that, where I could have buried the beater, I still brought the beater off because it felt right, because it was that 70s Americana kind of vibe. You know, so basically with all these things, it's about having the tools in your toolbox to be able to use it, you know, not necessarily saying, oh, I've got to play it this way for a certain style, because that doesn't always, you know, the rules don't always stand for all the way through everything. You know, rules are there for a reason, but we can still bend them and shape them and move them around, you know, if the song or the feel of you playing suggests it, you know. But if you haven't got the bury the beater, non-buried beater, holding the stick too tight, all these things, if you haven't got, and the tuning issues we've spoken about, if you haven't got those sort of in your armory, then, you know, you've got nowhere to go. You've just got the one sound and the one idea, which could be a great idea, but it's good to have these other options. And of course, dealing with sound, we're also looking at, if we're looking at toms, you know, do we look at the different heads that we use? And, you know, I'm with Remo, but you can do this with Aquarian or Evans or Code heads, whatever you want to use, or the heads that came with your kit, whatever they might be, cheap or expensive. You know, look at the tuning, both of the top and the bottom head. Also looking at our choice of heads on the bottom. Some people want concert toms with no resonant head on the bottom, which is cool. Most people, though, go for like a clear. I go for an Ambassador, Remo, you know, clear on the bottom on all my toms, really. But sometimes on a jazzier session or a soul-y session, I might put Ambassador whites underneath, you know, white Ambassadors. That can work too. It gives you a very different way of tuning the drum and making it sound different. Equally on the top, you know, we've got, in the Remo world, we've got your Emperors, we've got pinstripes, we've got Ambassador clears, Ambassador coated, and other options, but they're the ones that I mainly, you know, go to for various sounds. And they all sound brilliant. I love the Emperors. I mean, I have to say they're my favorites, both coated and clear. I just love them on the top of my toms. They just sound great. On my Leedy kit, I've got Ambassadors on the top, Ambassador clear on the bottom. But on my they're over there, that's why I'm pointing. On my 1968/69 Ludwig Super Classic, I've got whites top and bottom. You know, and in the cupboard over there, I've got a load of Remo heads, and I can, you know, spare heads, and some that are old but not battered, but, you know, I could use, and I could change it around. You know, that Leedy, actually, even though it's a 1966 Shelly Man Leedy model drum set, and it should be with really white coated top and bottom, you know, as the rule. There's a video somewhere of me playing it at Nick Allen's studio, and I put clears on the bottom, which were already on there actually, and Ambassadors, no, Emperors on the top. And it sounded just, you know, if you looked away, you'd think it was a modern rock kit. because the shells are made so well on that kit. It's just beautiful in that burgundy sparkle. It's a lovely kit. But yeah, with those heads on, it became a different kit again. So when if you've got like, I don't know, I get people writing to me saying, you know, I've only got like a cheap Hohner drum set or a, you know, Gear for Music type drum set. It's like, okay, yeah, it's not a top grade make, obviously, but you get some decent heads, learn how to tune it, and get some lessons and learn how to play it. All of a sudden, that kit doesn't sound too bad. And I think I've said before, I've been to some studios all around the world, and I've seen, you know, they have in the corner maybe a Gretsch and a DW or a Yamaha or something, but they might also have like a cheap kit somewhere which is set up, and they go, oh, this sounds groovy. You know, I know it's only a whatever the make might be, but it just sounds really good with mics on it. We really like it. You know, not always, but sometimes that happens. I remember I went to a studio in New York once, and it was a Yamaha Stage Custom, and it was great. And they had like Sabian B8 cymbals, and I was a bit like, hey, I'm not going to play these, you know. And he said, no, give it a go because we'd rented stuff anyway for the tour. It was with Modern English back in 1996, 95, 96, around that time. So I said, okay, you know, thinking, I was using Zildjians at the time. So, and I'd hired this Zildjian set for the tour we were doing. I thought I'd put these on. But no, do you know what? I got in there, played it for a bit and was like, oh, it'll be rubbish. Went back in the control room and it sounded ace. And I was like, do you know what? That's brilliant. Let's just stick with this setup. So sometimes I did a little thing on cymbals a while ago when Bob Zildjian taught me how to select cymbals for people, you know, and yeah, sometimes using your eyes isn't the best thing. You should always use your ears because that's more important. No matter what the color of the cymbal, what condition it might look like, as long as it's not broken, if it sounds good, it's a good cymbal. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so sound's really important. Same with cymbals, you know, experiment with different cymbals, dark cymbals, light cymbals, bright cymbals. Go to car boot sales. I know a lot of people that buy really cheap drums and cymbals and drum gear from car boot sales. Sometimes people don't know what they've got in the attic or in the shed and they just want to get rid of it. And you can end up with some really nice stuff. Or some really cheap stuff that looks like it should be really rubbish, but when you play, it's actually okay. So you put that in your cymbal safe or you put that in the drum cellar and you've suddenly got something a bit different that you can pull out. So, you know, and as long as you've got the space to keep it in, which, you know, some of us haven't. I've got drums everywhere here and cymbals. It's worth doing because you never know. All right, buying a nice new cymbal for yourself, £300-400 for a ride or whatever. It's amazing. Of course it is. And the companies need to keep the money going around, circulating through the system, and the shops need to survive. And I understand all that. And that's a thing that has to happen. I'm certainly not knocking that, you know. That's commerce, that's business. But I think, you know, the second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand market, there's some really cool stuff out there that you can use and just keep. Like I know someone the other day who said to me, I just bought the top of a hi-hat pair. They didn't have the bottom one, so I just bought it anyway for like a couple of quid. It's like, great. And they said, no, when I put it on top of one of my Paiste ones, or paste, however you want to say it, it sounds brilliant. And I could put it underneath maybe as well. So, you know, give me a different sort of funkier sound with my hi-hats, a trashier sound or whatever. You know, so those things are kind of cool. So experimenting. If you're a lover of dark cymbals, you know, let's say K's cymbals, or for me, the Vulcan Dark Master is the range. Again, you could say, oh, it's a jazz cymbal. Yeah, it's just a jazz cymbal. That's great. We'll put that in the jazz world. I've used it on rock gigs. I've used it on sort of some of the 80s sounding sort of Little Men tracks that we've done. And I used the Dark Master Crash on Andy's sort of Americana sort of session last weekend. You know, you can't call it, as I say, it has to be, companies like to brand things to put them into a market so you understand what you're getting, which is totally fine. I understand that. But at the same time, you take it out of that. And as I say, I play like a jazzy ride in a rock setting, it suddenly works. You know, not always, but it can. But if I had that mindset of, oh, this can only be used in this style of music, that goes for the drums, sticks, brushes, any of the drum world stuff we're talking about, heads, all this. It's not to do with that. It's about how it sounds in the music, how it's tuned. You know, so getting used to sound is really important. You know, this sort of thing could go on all day, and I'm nearly up to 15 minutes, so I want to keep it fairly short. But if you're out there wondering, should I buy something different? Even if it's cheap, should I give it a go? Yes, do it. Should I change my heads to a different sound? Yeah, do it. I know it comes down to money. If you can afford it, go and do it, because you never know what's going to happen when you know, put that head on, put that cymbal on, change your sticks or whatever. All of that is really, really, really important. Bass drum beater, having different bass drum beaters, a wool one, a plastic one and a wooden one or whatever, and a really, muffled one, that the big muffle, it's around somewhere, I've got one. So today is all about sound. Reinvent your sound, think about your sound. Now, people have said to me before in clinics and various things, oh, but live, it's, a lot of things get hidden under the band. And, that is kind of true. But if something sounds rubbish, like I said earlier, acoustically, it's going to sound rubbish through the mics. So the best you can hope for is making it sound good to you in the room acoustically. Then the kit's got a better chance of sounding good. And you have got a better chance of sounding good in the music. So that's, majorly important. Now in the studio, of course, with the mics on it, you can hear a pin drop. You can hear everything perfectly. So yeah, really got to get on your game when you're in the studio. You could experiment as well. One thing I didn't mention was moon gels and, the big fat snare thing and all that business. I mean, I personally cut out old heads, different sized heads, and I do, white coated, I'll do Emperor, and I'll do clears, and I'll just have them and I can put them on my drums so you instantly get a different sound. And I keep them in my snare case or tom case or whatever, or bass drum case, so I can always whip them out when I need them, just to change the sound up. Again, just having ideas, maybe a little chain on the ride cymbal for a little rivet ride, all these little things which seem like, oh, they're not important, but sonics are so important, and sound can be so important. And sometimes people say, oh, I'm not a very good player, and I'll say to them, listen, you're playing great, but I tell you what is really great is your sound. You sound great. You make a lot of my students watching this, thankfully, virtually all of them sound great, but they'll sit on my drum kit and it just sounds good, even if they're sort of not getting the part that they're learning with me or whatever it might be, or whatever they're doing on the drum set in that lesson. If it's not quite right and they're cussing and cursing, I'm saying, yeah, but you're making the kit sound good. As you're doing it, it sounds like music. And hopefully some people out there are nodding now because they understand what that means. But you can have a great player, but if they don't know how to address the drum kit and play the drum kit, it's never going to sound good. So think about your sound. That's what this is about. So have a great Tuesday. I'm off to the studio to do some more frolicking around, with the kind of stuff that I do. And remember to like, subscribe, share these videos. Leave some comments below if you want to, good and bad and ugly. And I'm bidding you farewell. Rob's out of here, and have a groovy Tuesday, as I say, and a great week. And I'll catch up with you hopefully on Friday. I'm off to the recording studio in Devon for 2 days, which is going to be exciting. So hopefully I'll catch some footage of that, some footage of that, and I'll be able to make that into a video, hopefully for Friday, maybe Saturday, because I'm busy. And then I'm off to a Batman exhibition on Sunday with Emma, which is going to be fantastic. Anyway, enough of that, blah, blah, blah. Have a groovy time, and I shall see you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye.